I've often thought about this, like what's a story worth telling? I started painting because I had never studied it and I wanted to explore color. So it's like, okay, I don't know this now. How do I figure this out? How do I negotiate it? This was one of the only ones I have left in the studio from my time in Scotland at the Glenfiddich residency. And so when I was there, I started out the first 3 weeks just like kind of walking around the Highlands and drawing kind of really small, miniature kind of like moments of like moss or growths or flowers, rocks. I'm like, okay, like, what if we created a painting in which you actually couldn't tell scale? Is it micro or is it macro? Am I looking at like a rock formation or is it a body? I became really kind of then interested in landscape in like a real sense. And then when I came back, I think my paintings reflected that. So this is a shed at a family place that we have up in Mount Forest, Ontario. I use it as like a sculpture studio. When I work in sculpture, I often kind of reference Rodin, and one of the things that Rodin I thought really kind of brilliantly mentioned or talked about in sculpture was that painting could never capture the moment of a movement, but sculpture could. Painting could capture the before and the after, but never the in process, and that sculpture offered that moment of in process. Thinking about how sculpture could maybe capture the before and after, and that's how I sort of moved into working in sculpture. I started off with a contour drawing of whatever it is I'm sculpting. So most recently I've been doing drawings of my hands. And so I'll start with a contour drawing that's very quick, probably like 1 minute. Usually blind, so I'll close my eyes and then I'll use that to form a more detailed drawing. And then from there I'll use that and pick a section of it and then start to carve it out of the stone. As you're carving, you're sort of reducing the form and simplifying it to kind of match the drawing, but then also making changes and shifts based on what you remember. Over the summer, I was thinking about my hand in relationship to my son's hand, in relationship to my father's hand, and how we sort of share these similarities in our hands, but have very different ways of using it. My father was like a bus driver, and so he used his hands quite a bit. I've always thought of them as like really muscular, intense hands, whereas my hands much more delicate, and I draw and I have like sensitivity to those lines. And so thinking about the differences of that in relationship to the stone, which then also requires like the handmade element of it. I really see it as like kind of creating lines and creating forms. And I feel like painting and drawing do very similar things. Drawing is really kind of foundational to how I start most of my work. I started drawing like so young, like probably like 6 or 7, drawing from comics. And with that, it kind of comes like a sort of muscle memory to how you use the medium. And that for me allows me to sort of like work through any idea. So when I was working in performance or working in sculpture or now painting, like the drawing allows me to kind of work through it. And in fact, most of my paintings also try to mirror the way in which I draw. I use both my studio in Toronto and my studio up north as like places to kind of get away and think. 80% of the time in the studio is like looking. So the solitude helps that. I use the sort of like nature that surrounds this space, like the moss or the lichen or like the trees, the change of season as like kind of color palettes and also shapes for a lot of my paintings. So it's a place to kind of come and sort of see that sort of idea of time, that shift in time and making within it. When I'm at the studio at the farm and I'm hammering away, there's like a slowing of pace and a slowing of looking. And that sculpture reminds me of that slowness. And then now that's like in me, it's like a memory. And so now when I go into like maybe a more busy environment, I'm able to sort of slow down and see what's around me. And then that kind of feeds back into the painting. But I never fully adjust to the country either. I never fully kind of fit into that pacing. And then it's like coming back here out of pace again. I really do think like the way you see something is a slip out of time.